Noah's shoulder, Han Yujin spoke happily to him, fantasizing about incredible combinations of using their skills. "You are simply the best, Noah." Hearing Han Yujin's words of praise, Noah, touched by these words, could hardly hold back his tears and said, "This is the first time I have ever been praised like this." But in any case, it is obvious that Noah enjoyed living with Han Yujin. Perhaps it was all thanks to Han Yujin's "my baby is the best" skill. But regardless, Blue also grew up quite well while she was training with Noah. Having grown to a considerable size, the day finally came when Blue decided to get even with Mir for his greeting. Noticing that he was lying peacefully, Blue flew in his direction. But her plan of revenge failed. Peace was stronger, and easily knocked the overconfident Blue on the pot. Seeing this, Yujin exclaimed in alarm, "Oh no, Blue!" Seeing what was happening, Han Yujin, approaching his pet, said to Mir in embarrassment, "Mir, please be more friendly, just this once." Han Yujin threw his arms around his pet and began to cuddle it. But he thought sadly, "The world doesn't seem to like it. It seems that my father is working more than he is resting." Thinking about this, and hugging his pet to give him a piece of his father's warmth, Han Yujin said, it's okay, it's my dad's job, what can I do?" Thus, these joyful and productive days, when Han Yujin was able to successfully train his students, passed one after another. And then, on one of these days, Song Hyun-jae suddenly came to visit them with congratulations and a large bouquet. Holding it out to Yujin, he said, "Here is a bouquet, the evil one of Blue's growth." Seeing such a visitor on his roof, where he was practicing, Han Yujin thought, but still, there were some things to take care of. When Song Hyun-jae saw this piercing look that Yujin was giving him, he said sadly, "You have such a cold look. These flowers are from Seo-yoon. Please accept them." As Han Yujin accepted the bouquet, he thought, he must be busy. I didn't need to deliver them personally. Then he said, "So why did you have to come here yourself when there are delivery services?" Hearing this question, Song Hyun-jae answered him, "Your thoughts and words are too contradictory." Hearing this, Yujin asked, "So what did you want?" To which Song Hyun-jae replied, "I am hurt by your cold hospitality." After saying this and looking up at the sky where Noah Luir was flying in the form of a dragon, Song Hyun-jae said sadly, "I, as an investor, just want to catch the debtor who ran away from me." Seeing that the leader of the Jupiter Guild had come to Han Yujin, Noah immediately rushed over to protect Han Yujin if necessary. Stopping behind Han Yujin, Noah Luir spoke to Song Hyun-jae in an offended tone. "I didn't run away, but I kept my promise." After saying this, Noah also added, "Don't drag Han Yujin into our personal affairs." To which Song Hyun-jae replied, "You should have said that before you ran away." After making this statement to Noah Luir, Song Hyun-jae said, "You seem to be obeying Han Yujin very properly. Have they taken you as a pupil?" Hearing such provocative words from the head of the Jupiter Guild, Noah Luir angrily replied, "I am a human being." Hearing such an unpleasant conversation between his comrades, Han Yujin decided to interrupt it to prevent terrible consequences if they started a fight here, exclaiming, "Stop, Noah." Interrupting the argument between the two S-classes, Han Yujin stood in front of Noah and said, "He is my responsibility. If you think about it, it was me who took Noah under my wing." After making this speech in defense of Noah, Han Yujin also added, "I made the decision to bring you. I'm doing this for myself, really, so don't worry." Hearing these words, Noah was touched. Yujin. Then Han Yujin thought in confusion. Noah must not transform back into a human, otherwise. Thinking about what would happen to him in such a scenario, Han Yujin continued his thought. "I will see too much bare skin. There's not even a piece to cover it." After thinking about this, Han Yujin spoke to Song Hyun-jung, who was standing in front of him. "I don't know what your problem is, but I have to take Noah away." After saying this, Han Yujin noticed Song Hyun-jae's eyes light up with anger and added later, "So, you should discuss the debt issue with me, Mr. Investor." After delivering such a provocative speech, Han Yujin extended his hand to Song Hyun-jae and spoke menacingly, "What do you want in exchange for Noah?" And that was the end of it. A short time later, a news report was broadcast on television saying, "The guild affected by the incident has decided to disband." Eyewitnesses claimed that there was a golden dragon at the scene. The cause of the incident was recognized as a dungeon breach. When Song Hyun-jae heard this news, he spoke on the phone and said, "Good, great job." After praising the artist's work, Song Hyun-jae hung up the phone and looked at his phone and said happily, "My investment is finally paying off." Thinking of his debtor, Song Hyun-jae said happily, "Noah's poison is unbeatable, but his ability to transform is much more useful." Recalling Noah Luir, the leader of the Jupiter Guild, said happily, "Among all the famous hunters, there is no one who can transform into a monster. So, after killing the target, we can only pretend that it was a dungeon breakthrough." Thinking about this scenario, Song Hyun-jae wondered, he might not have an easy time with S-class members, but with any other class, or perhaps with an ordinary influential person, it will be a piece of cake. Thinking about the power he possessed, Song Hyun-jae said ominously, "With his help, we will destroy all the supporters of Hanshin and the Destroyer Guild. thereby weakening them. Thinking back to the agreement he had discussed with Noah, Song Hyun-jae thought, and Han Yoo-jin's abilities will once again be in my hands. After that, when he returned to reality, Song Hyun-jae spoke as he picked up the soda can. In my hands. Holding out a can of tea to Sung Han-jin, Han Yoo-jin spoke thoughtfully to him. Is this one okay? Taking the jar in his hands, Song Hyun-jae began to examine it, and then Yoo-jin spoke to him. The last time I saw you drinking Earl Grey, after offering the drink to his guest and holding Noah close, Han Yoo-jin added, that's why I bought a bunch of different teas, so you can choose which one you like. Hearing this, Song Hyun-jae thought, does he even know that he accidentally ruined my plan? After thinking about it, Song Hyun-jae decided that the price for Noah was very high because his plan to obtain Han Yoo-jin's power was based on him. Then Song Hyun-jae said, I have invested quite a bit in Noah. After saying this, Song Hyun-jae also added, I cannot disclose details, but they include information about obtaining a rank for him. I thought he could be useful, even though he was in cheerleading. After saying this and staring intently at Han Yoo-jin, who was very embarrassed, Song Hyun-jae said, that's why I helped him start his own guild to get rid of Rieta. But then one day, he came to you. After saying this, Song Hyun-jae also added some unpleasant information, saying, that art guild was disbanded with a single phone call. Hearing this, Han Yoo-jin said in surprise, huh, a guild? Hearing this information from Sung Hyun, Han Yoo-jin turned to Noah, and he replied, yes, since I decided to stay here. Then Yoo-jin thought in confusion, is this really normal? Hearing this, Song Hyun-jae said in a sad voice, I was planning to use the independent guild as a cover, but you found out about it anyway. Hearing this, Yoo-jin thought in confusion, you just confessed. After listening to Song Hyun-jae and Han Yoo-jin's conversation, Noah Luir stepped out from behind Jin and spoke confidently. I am still an S-class hunter. I can pay off all my debts by myself. After saying this, Noah added, if you want me to, I can join you in the sweeps. Hearing this, Song Hyun-jae denied his offer, saying, I'm sorry, but Jupiter has enough hunters. After saying this, Song Hyun-jae added in frustration, besides, you have no idea how interesting you are to me right now. You don't have a guild, and besides, Han Yoo-jin knows about your shape-shifting ability. After saying this, Song Hyun-jae also gave a follow-up to his previous speech. You're useful to Han Yoo-jin, right? Then, in an attempt to provoke Noah, Song Hyun-jae said, you have resistance to poisons, so you could use him as a riding animal. Hearing this suggestion, Han Yoo-jin responded indignantly, but Noah is a human being. Realizing that his suggestion did not work, Song Hyun-jae tried something else, saying, with him, you could go to a pretty high-end dungeon without flying monsters. To which Yoo-jin replied just as indignantly, I don't need to go to dungeon clearing. Hearing such suggestions from Song Hyun-jae, Han Yoo-jin thought in confusion, this bastard has figured out all my plans. He nervously asked the Jupiter Guild leader, so, what do you want from me? With a thoughtful pose and a hand to his beard, Song Hyun-jae said happily, we have already signed a contract with you to train a monster. You don't need ordinary hunters either. Without hesitation, Song Hyun-jae stretched out his hand toward Han Yoo-jin with 3 fingers outstretched and exclaimed, 3 times. Standing in this position, holding out his hand to the surprised Han Yoo-jin, Song Hyun-jae said happily, how about you give me help 3 times when I need it? Hearing this proposal, Han Yoo-jin, who was creating a contract letter, said, that sounds too vague. Create a contract with a more detailed description. Hearing this suggestion, Song Hyun-jae rejected it. After rejecting Han Yoo-jin's offer of a contract, Song Hyun-jae said to him, there's no need for that. Hearing this response, Yoo-jin was surprised to hear him say, no? What if I turn on the fool when you need me? Hearing Han Yoo-jin say that, Song Hyun-jae said confidently, then it will make me sad. After all, I trust you. Hearing such a strange answer from Song Hyun-jae, Yoo-jin thought in surprise and disgust, have you gone completely mad? Looking at the self-confident Song Hyun-jae, who was looking at him with a sly smile, Han Yoo-jin thought in confusion. He wants a simple verbal agreement when he hands over the S-class hunter to me? Thinking about this offer that guild leader Jupiter had made to him, Han Yoo-jin thought in surprise. Is he so confident that he will get what he wants without a written contract? Looking at Song Hyun-jae with a thoughtful glance, Han Yoo-jin thought, he's not even under my influence. Strange. Well, let's pretend that I'm going to help him. Without thinking about Song Hyun-jae's suggestion for long, Han Yoo-jin agreed to the proposal, saying, all right, let's do it your way. Hearing this, Noah spoke up in confusion. Yoo-jin. But after that, Han Yoo-jin also made some exceptions to this agreement to prevent unnecessary liability in the future. But I will refuse any request that I am unable to fulfill, or that may harm others. Hearing Han Yoo-jin's affirmative tone of voice as he agreed to cooperate, Song Hyun-jae reached out and said, don't worry, I'm not going to harm anyone. After they shook hands, Song Hyun-jae decided to ask about some conditions. And yes, that ability of yours that doubles the attack power. After saying that, Song Hyun-jae added, you can only use it when you have a damage-compensating item on you. Hearing this question, Han Yujin spoke in confusion. Oh yes, but I don't have that bracelet anymore. Hearing Han Yujin's response, the Jupiter Guild leader smiled sweetly and said before leaving, let me know if Yu Meng-woo creates something like this. Hearing about this agreement, Noah said in a sad, soft voice, no, no, no. Because of me, Han Yujin is being used. Hearing these words in the end, Yujin, not even surprised, thought, I knew he wanted my abilities. Hearing about this request, Han Yujin said happily in his head, haha, wake up, you fool. I will never help you. An item like this is very difficult to obtain. No sooner had he thought this than a short time later, when he arrived at Yu Meng's forge and was called to see him, Yujin paid for his words. Upon meeting him, Yu Meng held out his hand with 3 shiny balls saying, here, they are similar to that bracelet. Looking at what Yu Meng-woo held out to him, Yujin saw, Shallows beads, class, unspecified, used once. Podihan Yujin called out to him in confusion, what are you even doing there to get something like that? Do you even sleep? Hearing Han Yujin's words of concern, Yu Meng replied, I'll show you when it's ready. Standing behind Yu Meng and Yujin, Han Yu-hyun said, it would be very convenient to use this space when we go in for sweeps. Hearing this, Yu Meng replied indignantly, I don't want to see anyone else here. Hearing this, Han Yujin said to him, I know. You let him in at my request. After that, Han Yu-hyun held out his hand, which contained a strange egg, and said, thank you, Yu Meng. I think you might know what this thing is. Looking at this strange item, it was clear that it was an SAS-class item, the red egg. It was the reward Han Yu-hyun and Mir received for clearing the S-class dungeon. This item is one of the eggs that appear quite rarely before time returns. No one ever understood what this egg was for, as it did not react to anything and did not break. None of the abyssal scholars were able to find out what this egg could do by testing it before. But Yu Meng-woo, or Ismuar, might be able to use it. Hearing what Han Yu-hyun wanted from Yu Meng, Han Yu-ching looked at his younger brother in anger and thought in frustration, I arranged this meeting so that you two could become friends, you stinker. Holding the egg in his hands, Han Yu-hyun noticed something interesting happening around him and said in surprise, this? Walking over to the fire, which was slowly growing, Han Yu-heng exclaimed in surprise, ah, Ismuar. Hearing Han Yu-heng's question, Ismuar, who had woken up from his sleep, suddenly spoke, young flame is here. As soon as Ismuar appeared, the egg began to react to him, and suddenly began to crack as it sensed the elemental flame. Seeing this reaction to Ismuar's appearance, Han Yu-hyun said in surprise, an egg! Then, holding it in both hands, Han Yu-hyun began to observe what would happen next. As soon as the entire egg was covered with cracks, a bright light began to emanate from it. Then it cracked, and a lizard came out. Seeing this, Yu-heng said in surprise, a lizard? Seeing what had just happened after the flash of light, Han Yu-jin walked over to his brother and said in astonishment, did it hatch from an egg? To which Yu-hyun replied, it looks like it. The moment after Han Yu-jin approached his brother, the lizard suddenly crawled into his eye. Seeing what had just happened in front of him, Han Yu-jin jumped up in fright and exclaimed, your eye! Han Yu-hyun calmly replied, it's fine. It came out. After that, the lizard moved to Han Yu-jin's hand. Handing the animal to his older brother, Han Yu-hyun said to him, it was only there for a second. It looks like she liked it inside. Hearing his brother say this, Han Yu-jin looked at the lizard in confusion and said, what do you mean this? Looking at the lizard through his skill, he saw Fire Elemental, current grade, F. Contractor is Han Yu-hyun. Looking at this little guy, Han Yu-jin said in surprise, she's also a fire elemental? Hearing this, Yu-jin said in astonishment, the lizard was awakened by the power of Ismuar? Hearing this explanation, Han Yu-jin thoughtfully said in his mind, I guess that's why the eggs never hatched before, just as there were no spirits in our world in the beginning. Looking at the new pet that Han Yu-hyun was being very careful with, Han Yu-hyun thought, another change that occurred when time was turned back. Then he spoke, Fire Elemental. Han Yu-hyun applied his flame to the lizard to see how it would react to it, and as it climbed up to his neck, he said, she is completely resistant to the effects of the flame. Hearing this, Han Yu-jin said in surprise, a lizard eats flames? Upon learning this information, Han Yu-heng said to his younger brother, who had a new pet, then you can feed it, but try to raise it properly. It can become as strong as Ismuar if it hatches from an S-class egg. Hearing Han Yu-jin say this, Yu Meng said in a sad voice, ah, don't say that. Seeing that Ismuar was upset, Yu Meng began to call out to him in embarrassment. It's not true, Ismuar. You're the best. There's no way this kid could be as strong as you. Watching Yu Meng comfort his fire elemental, Han Yu-jin said thoughtfully, Yu Meng doesn't have it easy either, does he? Afterwards, Han Yu-jin, looking at what Yu Meng had given him, thought, anyway, it seems that bringing Yu Heng here was worth it. Besides, I received a compensating item. As he thought about this, Han Yu-jin suddenly remembered the Jupiter Guild's ideology, and thought in surprise. That was just a short while after Song Hyun-jae asked. Looking at his brother, who was worried about something and looked a little strange, Yu Hyun asked him, What is it, Yu-jin? To which he replied in confusion, Oh, nothing. Standing in front of his brother, Han Yu-jin was thinking, Hurry up and thank Yu Meng. Go ahead. I have obtained this object, but what is it for? If I go to the dungeon, it will be with my guild members. Although Han Yu-jin thought this while he was in the forge with his brother and Yu Meng, things actually turned out quite differently. Standing in front of the green lawn was a sad Han Yu-jin, who still had to help Song Hyun-jae. The latter, approaching Yu-jin, said joyfully, I have taken us both. Hearing those words from Song Hyun-jae, with whom he still had to go wherever he wanted because of their agreement, he still learned that Han Yu-jin had the damage-absorbing item. An hour earlier, while Han Yu-jin was still in his building, training with Blue, he heard a woman's voice outside of him, saying happily, Blue, I have brought the meat of the MOO Ensters. Han Yu-jin looked back and saw the head of the Destroyer Guild, and he was surprised to hear her say, Oh, Hyuna, your hair. To which she happily replied, I'm thrilled. However, the old bastards told me off. After Moon Hyun gave the meat to Blue, Han Yu-jin sat down with the girl nearby while she ate her lunch. They started talking, and Yu-jin said, So, monster cubs are rare all over the world nowadays. Hearing Han Yu-jin say this, Moon Hyun sighed heavily and said, Everyone is trying to get them and give them to you to raise. I should get one for myself too. As she said this, she put her hand on Yu-jin's shoulder, who was enjoying his drink, and then he spoke heavily. I don't have the strength for new monsters just yet. After saying that, the girl heaved a sigh of relief. Then she hugged him and said, That is why I am here, to remind you of your promise. You haven't forgotten that you promised to let me ride Blue when she's older, have you? Ask for whatever you want, I'll get it. Hugging Han Yu-jin, she squeezed him so tightly that he groaned and could be heard. Warning! Careless hugging can lead to accidental F-class murder. Deciding to change the subject, Han Yu-jin asked, Right, you were at the S-class dungeon clearing, weren't you? I want to know what you got. Hearing this question, the girl said, Oh, you want to see? Surprised by the boy's question, she said, I got a good thing. Then Yu-jin thought, Of course I already know what it is. Taking out an item from her inventory, Moon Hyun showed him an item called the White Whale's Tear of Joy. This item was a one-time use. It cast an ice-type ability on equipment. Moon Hyun put it up for auction because all of her skills were wind-related. After learning all the information he needed about the item, Han Yu-jin thought, Now that I have Park Aram, if I buy it, I'll give it to her right away. After that, she also took out a golden vial with a rose in the middle. Showing it to Moon Hyun, she exclaimed, Ta-da! Here it is! Yu-jin looked at the bottle with astonished eyes and said in astonishment, To which the girl said, A very rare elixir. It's even better than a potion. It's like an extra life. The first one in Korea. Hugging him tightly, Moon Hyun said reassuringly, You're not going to ask him, are you? Han Yu-jin said in confusion, You didn't get anything else? Something like an empowering item? Hearing Han Yu-jin ask this question, Moon Hyun said in surprise, No, but I did get S-grade gloves. Hearing this, Yu-jin thought in surprise, What, another reward? Looking at the girl in confusion, Han Yu-jin stood in place in astonishment, out of touch with reality, thinking, But this is the same dungeon. The rewards have never changed before. Seeing that Han Yu-jin was very confused and out of touch with reality, Moon Hyun touched his face and said in surprise, What's wrong, Hyun-nim? You're floating in the clouds. Is it really? As soon as the girl said that, she added with a seductive expression, Are you in love with me? Hearing this, Yu-jin replied sharply, What the hell? Not at all. Looking at the joyful Moon Hyun, who started laughing at Han Yu-jin after hearing his answer. Yu-jin thought calmly, Well, many things are different from the future, I know. Thinking along these lines, Han Yu-jin also added, looking at the joyful girl who would be different from himself in the future, including her current hairstyle. A short time later, Han Yu-jin and Moon Hyun paid a visit to Park Aram in Luir. When she saw the couple on the roof, Aram exclaimed happily, Hi, Ani. Then Noah said hello as well. Hello? Seeing that they had more guests, Yu-jin thought, Aram and Noah as well. Things have changed a lot for the better. Walking over to Blue, Park Aram looked at her with a fearsome look and asked, What's wrong with Blue's tummy? When Moon Hyun saw Yu-jin Noah standing next to her, she said curiously, Are you the dragon boy that everyone is talking about? A while later, Han Yu-jin was lying on a deck chair watching the news. Looking at his phone, he saw Suncross White Shield in the United States, The Book That Sings Lullabies in the Philippines, and Windy Bow in India. Are the awards the same in the rest of the dungeons? Reassuring himself that it was probably just a fluke, Yujin turned off his phone and thought, no, it's possible. Maybe she changed just this once. After a while, Han Yujin still couldn't accept what had happened. So he went to his brother, who was in his office, and said confidently, let's go to the dungeon. When he heard this suggestion, he was surprised. What? Having agreed on all the arrangements and prepared to go, the brothers were soon on their way to the dungeon. As they were going on their adventure, Yu Heng asked his older brother, do you want to ask the system something? Hearing this question, Han Yu-hyun answered him while holding the sleeping Mir in his arms. Yes, about Squeaky, and in general. And he thought, I can't tell him that I turned back the clock, but now the future is different from what I knew it to be. After telling his brother his motives, Han Yujin also added, powers don't work on Squeaky, and she doesn't grow up like Mir or Blue. Sometimes she behaves very strangely. Recalling one of the strange incidents that happened to him, Han Yujin said that one day in the middle of the night, he woke up to the noise of the TV blaring. We continue. Next up. Waking up to the noise of the TV, which for some reason was on, Han Yujin got out of bed and said in surprise, what, the TV? As Han Yujin walked out of his room and rubbed his eyes, he said in a sleepy voice, is that you, Mengwu? After he said that, the TV said, the Jupiter Guild has taken in a foreign S-class hunter. Han Yujin saw Squeaky sitting on the couch, watching the news. And the news was saying, Evelyn Miller is an independent huntress who specializes in long-range attacks. Seeing his pet watching TV on the couch so late at night, Han Yujin said to her in surprise, Squeaky? Running over to her, Yujin began to examine her with joy and said, did you turn on the TV? How did you get on the couch? You used the basket. Are you a genius? Looking at the annoying Han Yujin hanging around her, Squeaky sighed in frustration. After that, Yujin held out the crystals and said happily, my little genius, I am impressed. Do you want a mana stone? At that, the squeaker just squeaked in displeasure and turned away. Han Yujin looked at his pet and said in surprise, Squeaker, it's you, isn't it? To which she said in the affirmative, Pie. After telling this story to his brother, Han Yujin added, and then she became stupid again and threw herself at the mana stone. Is there something wrong with her? Something like dissociative identity disorder? Hearing his brother's story, Yujin said in surprise, it is possible. There are monsters that grow more than one head as they grow up. Each one usually has its own personality. Maybe Squeaky is one of them. Hearing this, Han Yujin said in a frightened voice, I don't know how to feel about this. I'm just going to ask. I can't bring her with me because she's an F-class and she can't wear any equipment. When Han Yujin said this, Mir had already woken up and turned his attention to something that interested him. A few seconds later, the Fireline cub approached Han Yuheng's hand, which had a lizard-shaped fire elemental on it. Seeing his pet's strange reaction, Han Yujin said in surprise, huh? What's wrong, Mir? Oh, the fire lizard is also with us, right? As soon as Yujin said this, Mir was about to catch it, as his feline instincts were awakened. The next moment, the lizard ran up Han Yu-hyun's shoulder, and Mir could only watch in excitement. Seeing the lizard, Han Yujin said in surprise, isn't it an F-class lizard? Can I take it with me? Hearing this question from his older brother, Han Yu-hyun answered him, the lizard is always on me, so it won't get hurt. It is safe as long as it is on my skin. Seeing that his brother was looking at him strangely, Han Yu-hyun asked his brother, why? The latter, looking at the lizard crawling under his skin and transforming itself, replied in surprise, no, nothing, just... Hearing that his brother was worried, Han Yu-hyun said to his brother, you don't have to worry about me. You also stay close to me when we go to the dungeon. To which Yujin happily replied, haha, okay, I can depend on you. Meanwhile, Mir couldn't calm down, keeping a close eye on the lizard that was running around Yu-hyun. When Han Yujin was distracted by looking out the window, he thought, yes, things have changed for the better. The world moved away from him, closer to Yu-hyun. Looking out the window, Yujin thought, my younger brother and I have made peace, and we go to the dungeon together. But suddenly his peace was cut short. He saw Mir jump onto the face of his brother, who was driving the car. As he tried to get Mir off Han Yu-hyun's face so that he wouldn't be in the way, Yujin thought about how he had never even dreamed of doing this in his previous life. Taking Mir away from Han Yujin, who was completely confused, not having caught the lizard and not knowing where it had disappeared, Yujin admired his pet and wondered what difference did it make if other things changed. At least his brother was okay. Thinking back to the moment when he held his mortally wounded younger brother in his arms as they fought against Rauchatus, Yujin thought, the time when they were apart, the events he doesn't want to remember. Now for him, they were things that would never happen, and he could enjoy the life he had now, being happy for his brother and spending time with him. Arriving at the dungeons where they were supposed to be, the two boys found themselves in the middle of an area completely covered in snow. For Mir, there was no difference, and he caught snowflakes with his tongue. But for his brothers, when Yujin saw the unusual environment, he said in surprise, "Snow? This is supposed to be a sand dungeon." Hearing his older brother say this, Han Yu-hyun added, "And there are no monsters to be seen. What happened here?" Hearing his brother say this, Yujin said, "Could it be that this is all the work of the system?" After saying this, Han Yujin put Mira around his neck, saying happily, "A scarf made of Mira." After thinking for a while, Han Yu-hyun said to his brother, "Let's get out of here, Hyun." To which Yujin replied in surprise, "What? But if we wait a little longer, the system..." Hearing these words from his brother, Han Yujin said thoughtfully, "Can this system be trusted? Is it really not a trap? Maybe it's some guys trying to kill you." Hearing these words from his younger brother, Han Yujin was nervous. "Hey, what kind of person would change the dungeon like that?" Then, looking at his brother, Yujin noticed something strange and thought in confusion. Why is he so nervous? As he thought about this, Han Yujin suddenly thought, recalling the moment with the cultists his younger brother had told him about. He thought, even if many people want to get me. Looking at his brother with a piercing gaze, Han Yujin suddenly asked him, "Are you hiding something from me?" After saying this, Han Yujin added, "An ordinary hunter cannot influence the dungeon. Those you are afraid of are not the guild, nor are they hunters." Hearing this, Yu Heng said in confusion, "It's..." Hearing such uncertain speech, Yujin asked his younger brother, "Does this have anything to do with the sect, or whatever you mentioned earlier?" Hearing this, Yu Hyun just bowed his head. Looking away from his older brother, because he was ashamed to look him in the eye, Han Yu Hyun said quietly, "I can't say anything about it." Hearing this answer, Yujin exclaimed in surprise, "What? Why?" Hearing these questions from his older brother, who was disturbed by the situation, Han Yu Hyun spoke to him. "I signed a contract." Before he could finish, he was interrupted. An arrow was flying at his brother. Yu Heng had felt it before, and he put his arm around his brother to prevent the arrow from reaching its target. Seeing that they had been attacked and that the arrow had hit his brother, Han Yujin shouted out in alarm as he approached his brother, "Yu Hyun!" To which the latter merely replied, "Get the bead, Hyun." As soon as the boys saw that they were being attacked, Mir also prepared for battle, transforming into a bigger monster. Then Yujin noticed his brother's injury and thought in confusion, "An arrow pierced through an S-class arm?" While using a healing potion to heal the wound, the boys saw a creature with a bow in the distance. Looking at it, Yu Heng said in surprise, "A toy? Isn't that a monster?" Using his promising sprout skill, Han Yujin began to analyze the enemy, and what he saw plunged him into shock. Looking at his characteristics, Yujin said in surprise, "What the hell? This is a joke." He saw the enemy's characteristics in front of him. Tin soldier, no class. S, contractor. Seeing this, Yujin said in surprise, "He's an S-class?" After rereading his characteristics, Han Yujin spoke in confusion in his head as he pondered the information. "Number 6? There are between 1 and..." Imagining how many enemies there could be, Han Yujin thought in confusion as he looked around. Up to 5. Maybe even more. Looking around and seeing that they were surrounded by S-class tin soldiers, Yujin thought in confusion, "What the hell? Bastard system." Seeing that they were surrounded and about to be attacked, Han Yu Heng covered his brother with his body and shouted, "Hen, get out of here! I'll manage somehow." To which his brother replied, "Are you out of your mind? How will you manage on your own?" After saying this to his younger brother, Han Yujin suddenly exclaimed in fright when he noticed that the soldiers were attacking. "Ah, they're coming!" As the enemies were approaching and about to attack, someone's voice came from behind them and said, "Stop!" As soon as the toys heard this command, a huge magic box appeared behind them and began to pull them inside, when a strange voice said, "Everyone, turn around!" After that, all the soldiers began to fly into the magic box at the same time, simultaneously moving away from Han Yujin and Han Yu Heng. After all the soldiers flew back to the box from the hunters, a pink ball that appeared out of nowhere spoke to the boys. "You must have been frightened, sweetheart." Seeing this strange thing, Han Yujin, curious, went to the ball, but his younger brother stopped him, blocking his way with his hand and telling him to stay behind him. Looking at this strange toy, Han Yujin said in surprise, "A volleyball?" To which he immediately replied, "I'm sorry, I didn't think they would attack your bra." Hearing this strange reference to himself, Han Yujin, pointing to the ball in surprise, asked, "Oh, it was you. The system, right?" To which the ball bounced happily and replied, "Call me Rookie." Hearing this, Han Yujin, unable to control himself, pounced on the ball and began to kick it to the ground, shouting menacingly, "I don't care! You put a hole in my brother's arm!" Frightened by Han Yujin's sudden actions, which he did not understand, the system administrator exclaimed, "Ah, but it's partly his fault too." Hearing this excuse from the new system administrator, Han Yujin was surprised. What? What did my brother do? Before he could say it, his brother and the world caught his eye, and they were in the same layer. Looking at the unsuccessful attempts of his younger brother and Peace to get out of that prison, Han Yujin called out to them in fright, "Yu Hyun! Mir, why?" Looking at the ball he was holding in his hand, Han Yujin heard him explain what had happened to them. "I blocked it for a while. They're not allowed to hear our conversation." Jumping up from Han Yujin's hands, the pink ball spun around in flight and said, "This place was specially created for you, sweetie." Looking at Han Yu-heng and the fiery horned lion trapped in the barrier, the new system administrator said in confusion, "I won't let them burn him like they did that time." Hearing this explanation from the pink ball, Han Yujin gestured to his brother that he was fine, and said to the system administrator, "Well then, you took me away without saying a word." Hearing this, the new system administrator, feeling guilty for what he had done, said guiltily, "I'm sorry for attacking your brother. It's because he is involved in something we are not allowed to mention." Hearing these words from the pink ball, Han Yujin was very surprised, and then suddenly asked, "He said he couldn't tell me about something. Is it about some cultists?" Hearing Han Yujin's question, the new administrator replied, "I can't talk to you about that." Han Yujin added sharply, "Are they very dangerous? Will my brother be okay?" Observing this concern for his younger brother, the system administrator said, "Don't worry, there is no way they can harm you or your brother." After saying this, the pink ball also added, "It's against the rules to interfere directly." Hearing this unsatisfactory answer, Yujin, enraged, began to try to break the ball, shouting out menacingly, "But they can break the rules!" After a short time of mocking the ball, Han Yujin suddenly stopped when he heard a strange noise somewhere in the forest and looked in the direction of the noise in confusion. Then the newcomer spoke up. "See? It's dangerous to talk about them." After saying this, the ball also added, "Don't ask any more questions about them." When Yujin heard the strange noise coming from them again, he was alarmed. "What is that?" Seeing that Han Yujin was getting nervous about these strange noises coming from deep in the forest, the system administrator calmed him down by saying, "Don't worry. Everything will be fine as long as we're together." As soon as the new guy said that, he immediately added, "Sweetie's safety is also very important to us." Hearing this, Han Yujin breathed a sigh of relief. After telling Han Yujin everything he had to, the pink ball told the boy, "There is not much time left. Do you have any other questions?" Hearing this, Han Yujin suddenly became thoughtful. Thinking about what he still needed to know about the most important things, he went through his mind. "Right, I need to get to the point." And then he decided to ask his question. "I picked up an F-class bird named Squeaky." After saying this, the guy added, "It has a broken state window, and it's acting a little strange." Hearing this, the ball said thoughtfully, "A squeaker? Let me see. It doesn't work. Are you sure it is under your influence?" Hearing such a strange question, Han Yujin said in surprise, "What? That's impossible. The code word worked." Hearing these words from Yujin, the administrator said, "That's strange. Bring it with you next time." Hearing this request from the newcomer, Han Yujin was surprised to hear this. "Oh, you're going to help me deal with her?" He replied, "Yes, I'll delete it just for you." Hearing this solution to the problem, Han Yujin threw the ball aside with all his might and said angrily, "Delete it? She's alive!" Turning back to Yujin, the administrator said, "What's wrong? You have to get rid of the bugs." Shaking his head at this kind of problem solving, Han Yujin said in frustration in his head, "Are they all crazy? Can I trust them?" The more answers I get, the more uneasy I become. Approaching Han Yujin, the new system administrator said, "I don't think the F-class will cause many problems." Hearing this suggestion, Yujin thought, "He attacked my brother, and he talks about killing Squeaky so carelessly." Thinking about this whole situation, Han Yujin put his hand over his face and felt nervous and thought, "This reminds me of a scary story I read in my childhood. The story was about a strange deity who had his own goals for life, but he had no human feelings at all. It always gave people what they wanted, but in a distorted form. Recalling the moment when he defeated the dragon of poisons and the curses of Raukitas and received the wishing stone that could fulfill anything as a reward for his victory, the system deceived him with this stone. Thinking of this, and of the fact that the system did not want to fulfill the wish he had originally made, therefore, thinking about the fact that the system could still make its own decisions and perhaps use the boy, Han Yujin thought in confusion, "No, it can't be." After thinking about it, Han Yujin asked the administrator, "The reward for the S-class dungeon I know is different from the one in my past life." Although, unlike in his past life, the guy was satisfied with the outcome of his life. Everything had changed for the better. Then he added, Does it happen sometimes, or is it somehow connected with the fact of my regression? Hearing this question from Han Yu-jin, the system administrator decided to clarify some things before giving an answer, saying, "Was the reward a one-time item? Then it's most likely that the changes occurred because it was already used." Hearing this answer, Han Yu-jin was surprised and said, "But I turned back the clock. That's why it wasn't used." Hearing this question, the system administrator replied, "No, no." Hearing Han Yu-jin's strange question, the system administrator said to him in surprise, "Ah, sweetie, so you don't know." Jumping up and down in front of Han Yu-jin, the new guy spoke to him. "Just because you went back in time doesn't mean that all the previous events didn't happen." Hearing this response from the system administrator, Han Yu-jin, not understanding what he meant, exclaimed in confusion, "What?" Creating a mirage behind him to explain the world's workings in more detail, the new guy spoke to him. "Here we go. Let's take data overwriting, for example. Having created two vases in this mirage, one with liquid in it and the other empty, the administrator spoke and began to pour the liquid from one into the other. The world in 5 years from which you came has not disappeared. It has just been rewritten." Drawing attention to the vase into which the liquid was being poured, the system administrator added, "Most creatures are the same, so we can just merge them." After removing this mirage and creating another, the system administrator said, "So, as you are a regressor, you have overwritten the information about the time 5 years from now with the present." After creating images of all the people Han Yu-jin had come into contact with in the mirage, the system administrator said, "As for the others, their present will overwrite the original future." Showing all the people Han Yu-jin knew who were very cheerful and upbeat as they went about their lives, the administrator added, "They don't realize that they were united. Only someone who is very sensitive can feel something." Having said that, and having transported himself and Han Yu-jin to another place in the mirage, somewhere in the city, the administrator continued, "That's why, in theory, everyone still has the data of the original future." After saying that, the system administrator finally got to the part where Han Yu-jin's question was present, saying, "Apart from the items used," after also explaining what was what, the system administrator also added one horrible piece of news, or dead people. It's impossible to turn back time for them. Looking at Han Yu-jin, who was kneeling in the danja, listening to this explanation, the system administrator said in conclusion, "You cannot mix the information of the dead with the living." Kneeling in front of the system administrator, shocked by the information he had told the boy, Yu-jin said in dismay, "So," trying to come to terms with what he had just heard, Han Yu-jin added, "The events that happened in the original future cannot be undone. But instead, they will be erased and deleted." Hearing this question from the sweetheart, the new system administrator jumped up and down and said, "Yes, they will disappear. No big deal, right?" Hearing such a disappointing confirmation of his words that he had to pull out of himself, Han Yu-jin said in alarm, "Then my brother, who died that day in the dungeon." Thinking back to that day 5 years ago when it all happened, Han Yu-jin said in confusion, 25-year-old Yu Heng, who suffered alone for 8 long years, he died protecting me." Recalling the very moment when he left his brother at the stone to patch him up, and then he died, giving him his strength in double measure, Yu-jin said, "He still had to go through it." Thinking of his brother's terrible fate, Yu-jin added, "He will remain lying right in the dungeon where I left him, cut off from the world." Seeing Han Yu-jin, who was so distressed and immersed in his horrible memories, the administrator spoke to him. "The reward you are talking about has most likely been used. It simply does not exist in the post-regression world. That's why it didn't even appear." After listening to the system administrator, Han Yu-jin could no longer bear the separation and the pressure he felt for leaving his brother's body in that dungeon, and he spoke as he walked over to the ball. "Let him out." Hearing this sudden request from Han Yu-jin, the system administrator asked him in confusion, "What?" To which he replied by putting his hands on his brother's hands through the protective ball. "Why are you?" Unable to contain his emotions, Han Yu-jin exclaimed in frustration, "Separated me from my brother without saying a word? Let him out right now, instead of leaving him alone in a place like this." Unable to understand why Han Yu-jin was so irritated, the system administrator repeated himself again and then added, "Why, oh well, time's almost up anyway." After the system administrator said that, the power barrier disappeared, and then the younger brother rushed over to Han Yu-jin, shouting in embarrassment, "Han, did you finish the conversation?" Seeing the reunion of the two brothers, the system administrator vanished into thin air and said in conclusion, "See you again, sweetie. You can get in by knocking on the gate 3 times. After that, Han Yu-jin put his hands on his younger brother's shoulders and said with his head down, "You must be cold." To which he replied in confusion, "Huh? I'm an S-class. I don't wear that." Before he could finish speaking, Han Yu-heng suddenly interrupted, observing the actions of his older brother, who put his hand to his younger brother's temple. Yu-heng then spoke in surprise, "Hyung!" The next moment, Han Yu-jin pulled his younger brother close to him. nuzzling his shoulder to hold back his tears, and said sadly, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Han Yu-jin stood in this position for a while longer, thinking in confusion. My brother, my little brother who saved me at the cost of his life. Thinking about how his younger brother had fared in the world from which he had returned to this one, Han Yu-jin said sadly in his mind, "Has the future Yu-hyun already disappeared beyond this world?" After the trip to the dungeon, Han Yu-jin returned home in a completely bad mood. Lying in a dark room, on the cold kitchen floor, Han Yu-jin said sadly, "My little brother is dead." Looking down at his hands and thinking about how helpless and weak he must have been to allow this to happen, Han Yu-jin added, "He's gone." Imagining in his mind how his younger brother from another dimension dissolved into thin air and turned into nothing, he said in disappointment, "He, the one who suffered, the one who protected his older brother for 8 years." Lying on the floor, he said sadly, "I thought that everything that happened then, in the future, had ceased to exist." When Mir saw his grieving master, he came whimpering to him and wanted to comfort him. Approaching his master, who did not look like himself at all, Mir tried to help him in some way. Seeing that his grieving pet had come to him, Han Yu-jin shed tears and said to Mir, "Oh, Mir, are you worried about me? I'm fine." Hugging his pet, Han Yu-jin was determined to prevent the incident from happening again this time and said, "Yes, this time everything will be fine." Taking his pet in his arms and walking to his room, Han Yu-jin said, "I'm amazed, but right now I should only think about the present. There are some strange people connected to my surviving younger brother." Remembering the moment when he tried to ask his brother about them, Yu-jin thought, "Strong enough to make even the system developers afraid of them." When we were coming back, Yu-hyun avoided answering my questions. Thinking back to his past life and the memories of his brother that he had received after his death, Han Yu-jin took out his phone and thought, "With the help of the last retribution, I received only a part of my memories." Deciding to find out everything on his own, Han Yu-jin decided to turn to perhaps the only person who could know about those mysterious people. When Han Yu-jin dialed the number of his familiar friend, he heard a surprised voice speak into the phone and say, "You have never called me first." Hearing this from his interlocutor, Han Yu-jin decided to get right down to business and said, "I want to ask you something." After saying this, Han Yu-jin raised his head to the sky and looked at the clear stars. "Do you know of any sect that is similar to Confucianism?" Hearing Han Yu-jin ask this question, Song Hyun-jae spoke to him. "Young master will be angry if I answer this question and involve you in it." Calling someone who had been acting suspiciously even before Han Yu-jin's regression, it was obvious that he was in on it. After this response, Yu-jin said, "I'll be angry if you don't answer the question. Which is better?" Hearing Han Yu-jin say that in a confident tone, Song Hyun-jae said to him with a sly smile, "Of course, you're much more dangerous when you're angry." After saying this, Song Hyun-jae added to his words to Han Yu-jin, "I can't tell you, but I can show you. Prepare the bracelet and the attack enhancement skill." The next morning, after he discussed his trip with Song Hyun-jae, Han Yu-jin informed his younger brother that he was going to the dungeon. Hearing this, Yu-hyun responded in surprise. "You're going to go to an A-class dungeon?" Hearing this question from his younger brother, Han Yu-jin scratched the back of his head and said in confusion, "I took an interest in the ruins after our last cleanup. It turns out that Song Hyun-jae knows a dungeon where the fortress wall is still standing." Hearing this explanation from his older brother, Han Yu-hyun said to him, "Then take me with you." To which Yu-jin nervously replied, trying to refuse his help, "No need. It's just a picnic walk." Recalling his nighttime phone conversation with Song Hyun-jae, who emphasized to him, "If he says he wants to come with us, tell him no. They won't take the bait as strong as Yu-hyun." Recalling this moment of his dialogue with the Jupiter Guild leader, Yu-jin thought, "I don't quite understand what he meant by bait, but..." After refusing his younger brother, Han Yu-jin informed him that they would be taking another S-class warrior with them. Upon hearing this, Yu-jin said, "Instead of you, we will take Noah. I'll be completely safe with him. I have the skills to resist the Shala speed and support the system." Hearing this argument, Han Yu-jin was surprised. What if this is a trap? Hearing his elder brother's fears, Han Yu-jin spoke to him. "Why waste so much energy killing an F-class that can be easily swatted away? Besides, this dungeon doesn't belong to Jupiter, it belongs to the Judgment Guild." Hearing this, Han Yu-heng said in surprise, "Sudam?" Hearing his brother's question, Han Yu-jin said nervously, shrugging his shoulders, "Uh-huh. He wouldn't set a trap in someone else's dungeon." Hearing this argument from his elder brother, Han Yu-hyun said, "Well, if it's true, then... Well, it's true. If it's the Sudam..." Sudam is the guild of Yoon Kyung-soo, the last S-class member in Korea whom Han Yu-jin has not yet met. Han Yu-jin will be very interested to see this head of the Sudam guild, as he is the only one who did not come to meet him then, along with the other S-classes. Arriving at the entrance to the dungeon, Han Yu-jin saw Yoon Kyung-soo of Sudam standing in front of him. As Han Yu-jin approached the guild leader, He stretched out his hand to greet him and said happily, "It is a pleasure to meet you. I've been waiting to meet you for a long time." The latter responded in fright, jumping away from him. "No, I might accidentally hurt you or something." Pointing to the gate to the dungeon, Yoon Kyung-soo said in displeasure, "We're just lending you the dungeon. Whether you go in or not is up to you." "I don't care." When Han Yoo-jin walked into the dungeon, just before entering, he saw Yoon Kyung-soo spit on the ground and say menacingly, "Tell your brother that I didn't touch you with a finger. You've already eaten my brains out." As Han Yoo-jin walked toward the gate to the dungeon, he said in astonishment, "The head of the Sudam Guild doesn't seem to be happy with the abyss." Song Hyun-jae replied, "It's more like he just hates it." Hearing this from the leader of the Jupiter Guild, Han Yoo-jin was surprised. "What? Then why are we going to their dungeon?" To which he replied, "That is exactly why we are going there." Hearing this answer from his friend, Han Yoo-jin also heard him add, "They will almost certainly take this chance and attack, and maybe they'll also enlist additional support to guarantee their victory." Having said that, Song Hyun-jae added, "Our goal is to lure that support." Hearing this, Han Yoo-jin thought anxiously, "So we are going there knowing that we will definitely be attacked?" After thinking about this development, Han Yoo-jin decided for himself, "This is dangerous. We must be on our guard." Just as he thought this, Song Hyun-jae handed him a basket and said, "Take it." Han Yoo-jin took the basket and looked at it in confusion. "A picnic basket?" After handing the basket to Yoo-jin, Song Hyun-jae happily announced, "There's even a cake in there. I'll definitely be a great tour guide." As he said this and walked forward, Song Hyun-jae said to Han Yoo-jin in a joyful tone, "Don't you think this will be fun?" Han Yoo-jin looked at his guide, who would be by his side, and thought a little cautiously, "I guess I'll be safe with him, no matter who attacks us." At the same time, somewhere on another continent, a massive rally was taking place under the Association of Hunters in Mexico, and people were shouting, "We need security measures in our local dungeons, and we need them now." Standing with posters under the building, the protesters shouted, "Whose side is the association on? Pushing high-end hunters to emigrate. There are only 2 S-class hunters in the capital." At the same time, at the airport, Rieta was trying to leave the country, speaking menacingly to the security guards. "Can you hear me? Please send a complaint to the Korean Hunters Association." Hearing such threatening words from the S-ranked hunter, the guards were frightened. "Well, that's..." Then Rieta spoke menacingly. "An entry ban because of some illegal contract? Isn't that too harsh?" Hearing such a complaint from a high-class huntress, the guard was embarrassed. "It's not in my power." "You saw it yourself. Now the situation is not the easiest." When Rieta heard this excuse from the guard, she was angry and said, "That's why I'm telling you to quietly deal with my documents, if this is what they are doing here." After saying this, Rieta added angrily, "Breaking through the dungeon is not such a disaster." "Are you going to continue to behave like this?" Hearing this complaint, the security guard said, Well, I will contact the management, if you can wait a little longer." As soon as the girl said this, she was shot with a gun, and her blood got on Rieta's clothes. "Huh? What's going on?" Then someone's voice came from the street. "This is the association's punishment for its sins. The breaking of the dungeon is God's will. Do not resist it." When Rieta saw what was happening on the street, she was surprised and said, "What the hell? It's those terrorists again." Meanwhile, the crowd, which was fleeing the building in panic, was shouting loudly, "Are they crazy? Are they going against the association now?" Looking at her clothes, which were stained with the blood of the girl whose cat had been killed in front of Rieta, she said in disappointment, "It was a souvenir. It's a pity." At the same time, one of the port workers who was hiding near Rieta said in fright, "Eek! Call the police." Hearing these words from the frightened employee of this complex, Rieta took off her souvenir and threw it at the man and said, "You work here, don't you? Look closely." Taking out her weapon from her hiding place, Rieta exclaimed joyfully, preparing for a fight, "I will deal with them myself for you." Having said this and rushing into battle with the terrorists, the joyful Rieta said to the port worker, "But for this you have to send me to Korea." At the same time, the terrorists were fighting with the police and shouted to those who were blocking their way not to confront them, because it was pointless. The next moment, the terrorists heard a strange noise, and a few seconds later, Rieta appeared from the sky in front of them, leaving a crater after landing. Seeing the strange girl appearing in front of them, one of the terrorists shouted out to her, "What the hell? What are you doing?" She replied, laughing ominously, "Make sure you can dodge." After saying this, and crossing 2 sickles in front of her, Rieta spoke menacingly, using her skill, Eternal Slash. "I attack without distinguishing between an enemy or an ally." Only the terrorists heard the girl say this, and one of them only managed to say in surprise, "What? What are you talking about?" And then their voice broke off. The next moment, everyone within a 10-meter radius of Rieta was chopped to pieces, without even having time to do anything, let alone dodge. Seeing what happened to the terrorists in an instant, and Rieta enjoying the rain of blood from her dead enemies, a frightened voice sounded somewhere nearby. Ah, she's crazy! A monster! Having killed all the terrorists in an instant, Rieta stepped out of the bloody circle and said with a shrug, "Phew, I've dealt with everyone. And if I've done a good deed." As soon as she said this, she heard a strange voice behind her speaking to her. Rieta. Looking back, she saw a corpse speaking to her. Rieta, I'm asking you again. Hearing such words from the corpses that began to speak to her, the girl stood on the head of one of them so that he would not rise, and said menacingly, "You have not been heard for some time. Why did you come out again?" After saying this, she added, "I thought I warned you never to come near me or my brother again." As she spoke, many of the corpses came to life and began to walk toward her, repeating, "Rieta, I offer you one more time. A contract with asterisk, 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 asterisk." And so many corpses began to rise, and as they walked toward her, they said, "Rieta, contract, Rieta, one more time." Turning her back on them, the girl said happily, "Shut up, I will tear all your mouths open." But suddenly, the girl felt heavy in her body and fell to the ground. One of the corpses spoke to her, coming closer and closer. The first of the twins of the dragon of poisons and curses, Dio Valshidis. Then the girl, falling to the ground, thought anxiously, "What? My knees are all alone." Approaching Rieta, the dead man pointed at her with his finger and said in his hoarse voice, "Obey, the blood of curses and poisons." After saying this, the dead man also spoke to the girl who was chained to the ground. "Kill Song Hyunjae of Jupiter and capture brother Han Yu-hyun." Hearing these words from the dead man, the girl said angrily, "How dare you? Tell me what to do." After this exclamation, the girl cut off the zombie's hands and head. After such antics, the girl finally managed to get up, and exhaling heavily, she said, "Shit, my head hurts. What a piece of shit. I couldn't do it even if I wanted to." Holding her head against the excruciating pain she was experiencing from the exposure, she suddenly heard a voice behind her say, "I can help you." When she looked back to see who it was, she saw that it was the head of the ISS Guild, Choi Seok-wan, standing in front of her. As soon as she saw him, he spoke to her. "I've prepared a private plane for us nearby, just as this walking dead man told me.